Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. What if the reason your team missed its biggest quarterly target wasn't, a flawed strategy?
Right.
And it definitely wasn't a lack of hustle. But what if it was a subtle shift in global interest rates that you didn't even notice?
Oh, that happens all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So today, we are taking on a really fascinating mission for this deep dive. We're unpacking a really comprehensive article from smartkeys.org.
Such a good piece.
It really is. It's by Felix Römer, and it's titled Monthly Review. Analyze your wins, learn from setbacks, and plan ahead.
So practical.
Yeah, and the ultimate goal here is to explore how modern professionals can use this highly structured framework to step off the endless corporate hamster wheel.
Finally.
Right. To connect our daily work to these larger macroeconomic forces and actually stay ahead in the future of work.
And, setting that kind of baseline is incredibly relevant right now for you listening, because if we look at the current business landscape,
It's chaotic.
it's totally chaotic. This hyper-accelerated digital world, compounded by real, tangible economic instability. It is so easy to fall into a really dangerous trap.
A productivity trap.
Exactly. Mistaking activity for progress.
Yeah.
You answer 100 emails, you sit through 8 consecutive video calls.
And you feel totally exhausted by 5 p.m.
Right, so you naturally assume, well, I must have been productive today.
Right, but you might have just been spinning your wheels.
Exactly. But what this deep dive will explore is a structured way to pull yourself out of that reactionary day-to-day. It's about looking back with objective clarity so you can plan ahead with actual strategic confidence.
I love that. It's like trying to optimize the sails on your boat without ever looking at a weather radar.
Oh, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Because you can be the most efficient, technically skilled sailor in the world, right? Perfectly tying every knot, adjusting the rigging.
But if you don't realize there's a massive macroeconomic hurricane pulling the tide out from under you,
You're still going to crash.
you're going to crash hard.
Yeah. You have to zoom out to see the actual weather systems moving around you.
Yeah.
Now, before we really get into the weeds of how to build that radar, I do need to make a quick note for you, the listener.
Good call.
Yeah, so the source material we're looking at today draws on some very specific political and economic theories, including socialist history, to inform its organizational framework.
Right.
So I want to make it absolutely clear that we are impartially reporting the author's suggested methodology just to convey the ideas contained in the original source material.
Exactly. We're just looking at the mechanics.
Exactly. We aren't taking any sides here, and we aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoints. We're just exploring how this framework is intended to be used.
And that is an important distinction to make. We are purely evaluating the utility of the tool itself.
Right.
And to understand why this framework is positioned as being so uniquely effective for business efficiency, we first have to understand where the author, Felix Römer, is actually drawing his inspiration from.
Because it is definitely not your typical Silicon Valley playbook.
No, not at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the origin story here is genuinely surprising.
It really is.
The source outlines a direct connection to a magazine literally called Monthly Review.
Right, which goes way back.
Yeah, founded all the way back in 1949 in New York. It's the longest continuously published independent left socialist magazine in the U.S.
Wow.
And its roots are super deep in readable political economy. I mean, we're talking about early issues that included a famous piece by Albert Einstein.
The why socialism.
Exactly. And it's had legendary editors like Paul Sweezy and John Bellamy Foster. So this is a heavy-hitting intellectual publication.
And what's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy that Römer's extracting from that history.
Right.
He's basically suggesting that modern professionals should borrow the magazine's critical focus, which heavily spans economics, social science, and philosophy, and use it to pressure test their own daily business assumptions.
So applying that lens to yourself.
Exactly. Taking a critical lens that usually asks these deep structural questions about society and pointing it directly at your own monthly performance and planning.
Okay, wait, time out.
Yeah.
I'm a highly curious person, but you're asking a mid-level manager who is, likely already drowning in Slack messages and operational fires.
Right, they're exhausted.
To read mid-century Marxist theory on a Tuesday. I mean, how does reflecting on something like monopoly capital actually help someone hit their Q3 targets?
It sounds counterintuitive, right?
It sounds like a recipe for total burnout, just bogging people down in academic theory.
Right. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually prevents burnout
How so?
because it's all about widening the lens to understand leverage. Let's actually define monopoly capital really quickly to see how it works mechanically in a business context.
Okay, lay it on me.
In simple terms, it's the idea that as capitalism advances, massive corporate consolidation happens.
Right. The big fish eat the small fish.
Exactly. A few giant companies dominate the market, which limits competition and crucially limits worker bargaining power.
So fewer companies essentially control the board.
Precisely. So let's invent a hypothetical professional. We'll call her Sarah.
Okay, Sarah.
Sarah is a software product lead, and she's trying to get budget approval for a new data tool.
Right.
But she keeps getting denied, and she feels like a total failure.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Right. But if Sarah applies this critical lens and realizes her industry is experiencing massive consolidation, meaning there are fewer competitors.
So her executive team feels zero pressure to innovate or spend money on new tools.
Exactly. She suddenly realizes her local failure is actually a structural constraint.
Oh, wow.
So she stops wasting energy, banging her head against a wall, blaming her own presentation skills.
And instead figures out where her advocacy can actually change conditions.
Yes. She shifts from being a passive victim of market forces to an active navigator.
That makes a ton of sense. The blame game isn't just toxic, it's factually inaccurate because it completely ignores the surrounding environment.
Exactly.
So that macroeconomic lens sounds highly theoretical at first, but the article transitions into making it incredibly practical when you apply it to your own monthly performance review.
Right, the actual mechanics of it.
Yeah, let's walk through those mechanics, starting with how the framework decodes your wins. Because usually a win at work is just, checking a box on a screen and moving on.
And checking a box doesn't teach you how to replicate the success.
No, it doesn't.
This framework demands clear, quantifiable signals.
Right. So the article recommends quantifying your progress by scoring 3 distinct layers on a really simple 1 to 5 scale.
Yeah. What are the layers?
First, you score your outputs, which is what you actually shipped. For our hypothetical product lead, Sarah, that's the actual code deployed.
Makes sense. The tangible thing.
Exactly. Second, you score your outcomes, which is what actually changed in the real world because of what you shipped.
Like, did user engagement go up 10%?
Yes, exactly. And third, you score leading indicators.
Or the predictive stuff.
Yeah, these are the early signs of future success, like maybe a sudden spike in daily signups. So right away, the results are visible far beyond just basic task counts.
They give you a real three-dimensional view.
Yep. But then the framework layers on what it calls qualitative gains.
This is where those unique critical roots really begin to show their value.
Right.
Because when you review qualitative gains, you obviously note the technical skills you learned. That's standard.
Right, like learning a new coding language.
Yeah, but the source explicitly directs you to track what it calls the class and collaboration line.
Okay, break down the mechanics of that. What are we actually tracking there?
You sit down and explicitly document the hidden labor dynamics of your success.
Hidden dynamics.
Yeah, like who actually led the project in reality versus who held the official title.
Oh, that is so common.
Right. Or who did the invisible, unglamorous work of clearing logistical blockers? How did trust and communication structurally improve among the rank and file?
So going back to our product lead, Sarah, she might note that while the VP of product presented the glossy slide deck and got all the applause,
Typical.
right, it was actually a junior DevOps engineer working quietly in the background who resolved the server bottlenecks that ultimately saved the launch.
Precisely. By tracking the class and collaboration line, you are building a more accurate, ethical, and realistic map of how work actually gets done in your organization.
Which is huge.
Because if you don't map that, you really don't know who your actual allies are.
Wow, yeah. And I assume the same rigorous diagnostic approach applies to how the framework hammers setbacks, too.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about those setbacks, because when Sarah's next big launch inevitably gets delayed, how does she handle that without falling into a spiral of just, vague blame?
Well, the framework actively stops vague blame by forcing a brief, structured diagnostic pause.
Okay.
You take the immediate failure, and you force yourself to categorize the root cause into one of 3 buckets: process, resources, or timing.
Process, resources, or timing.
Okay, so was our underlying plan flawed?
Oh.
Did we lack the budget or the head count? Or did we just, launch the product on a major holiday when nobody was paying attention?
Exactly. And once you categorize the immediate cause, you widen your frame and look at the economy and crisis context.
Oh, going back to the macroeconomic radar.
Right. Did larger macroeconomic forces drive this outcome? For instance, did global inflation cause your cloud hosting vendor to spike their prices, which then froze Sarah's departmental budget?
Oh, I see.
And then mirroring the wins, you look at the work and class dynamics of the failure.
So not just the money, but the people.
Yeah. Were there mismatched financial incentives between the sales team and the engineering team?
That happens all the time.
Right. Were there massive bottlenecks caused strictly by corporate hierarchy rather than any actual technical difficulty? Oh, that is such a powerful way to look at it. You elevate the failure from a personal shortcoming to a systemic observation so you can actually spot the fixable causes.
Exactly. It takes the emotion out of it.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. During this reflection, the framework introduces the concept of the quick influence map.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. You write down one specific article that changed a choice you made, one conversation that sped up your execution, and maybe one book chapter that shifted your perspective that month.
It's basically mapping your intellectual supply chain.
Yeah. But the tactical rule I find absolutely brilliant is the mandate to celebrate without hype.
It is a profound shift in how we document our careers.
It really is. Usually when we succeed, we give ourselves a metaphorical gold star, or we write, crush the Q3 launch in a notebook.
Which totally useless a month later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The author instructs you to discard the hype and instead write down a repeatable win.
Right.
You list the specific mechanical steps you took to achieve the outcome, writing it as reusable proof.
You are basically building a personal, ongoing archive of hard evidence.
Yeah, you translate a fleeting feeling of success into a tangible professional asset, one that you can literally copy and paste into your next performance review or a job portfolio.
It creates a permanent record of competence.
Yes.
And a key part of that record is flagging any external data points, maybe a local demographic trend or a study policy shift that accidentally boosted that result.
Right, because if you don't know why you won, you can't do it again.
Exactly. You document it so you can actually plan around it or
Yeah.
account for its absence the next time.
Which transitions us perfectly to the next massive pivot in the source material.
Okay, where to?
Once you have successfully diagnosed the past month with this kind of structural clarity, how do you actively use this to stay ahead? Like, how do we move from historical reflection to future-proofing?
This is where we bring in the reading list.
Ah, yes.
The author heavily recommends using specific books to prompt critical thinking about your daily work. And again, to your earlier point, we are far outside the standard airport business book section here.
Yeah, no generic self-help here.
Right. He suggests taking an excerpt from Eduardo Galeano's famous book, Open Veins of Latin America, and using it as a prompt to think about extraction and supply risk in your own industry.
Wow, that's intense.
Or using a book like Labor and Monopoly Capital to ask yourself a deeply uncomfortable question about your own career trajectory.
What kind of question?
Are my current daily tasks de-skilling me?
De-skilling.
Yeah. Are they making me easier to replace, or are they building my long-term control over my livelihood?
That concept of de-skilling is a perfect example of why this historical theory is so vital right now. But let's actually define de-skilling for a second.
Sure.
It's essentially the process where complex, skilled labor is broken down into simple, repetitive tasks, usually so management can pay workers less or replace them more easily, right?
That's the classic definition, yes.
But how does that apply to a modern tech worker? Because, we tend to think of de-skilling in relation to like assembly lines in the 1920s.
Right, but look at generative AI right now.
Oh, true.
If our hypothetical product lead, Sarah, realizes her junior developers has stopped writing foundational system architecture.
And they are purely spending their days writing text prompts for an AI coding assistant.
Exactly. That is modern de-skilling.
Because they're losing the core skill.
Right. The workers are losing the fundamental knowledge of how the software operates beneath the surface.
That is terrifying.
It is. But by bringing voices from labor movements and critical economists into your personal planning, you anticipate these external trends.
You see it coming.
Yeah. And the source even notes that you should add a prompt about white supremacy, explicitly asking if corrective actions around equity and inclusion are relevant to your specific scope of work for the month.
Oh, wow. So you are actively designing fairer, more resilient workplace practices. But just speaking practically for a minute, How does reading about historical supply chains or critical labor theory translate into my actual calendar for next Tuesday?
Well, that is the core mechanism of the entire framework.
Okay.
It translates all this deep reflection into a highly grounded 30, 60, 90 roadmap.
Ah,
You don't just ponder these ideas in a vacuum, you build an operational plan.
right.
For each horizon, so 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days out, you set just 1 to 3 objectives.
It is 1 to 3.
Keep it focused.
Yeah.
And for every single objective, you are required to write a 1-paragraph rationale explaining exactly why this matters now based on your structural review.
That forces so much intentionality. And the source also strongly emphasizes factoring in seasonality.
Oh, absolutely.
You plot U.S. fiscal cycles, U.S. calendar cues, and market rhythms directly onto your timeline. You match your deliverables to when stakeholders are actually in the office and engaged.
Right, rather than pretending the business world operates in a perfectly smooth, uninterrupted vacuum.
Which it definitely doesn't.
Never.
But the most powerful mechanical part of this planning phase has to be building the risk register.
Yes. Building a risk register is how a professional armors their career.
I love that phrase.
Because a risk register is where you explicitly translate those economic and crisis signals we've been discussing into actionable safeguards.
So walk us through how a busy professional actually builds this without it turning into a 40-hour research project.
Well, it relies on observation, not exhaustive study.
Okay.
If your reading or just your general awareness during the monthly review tells you that overall labor availability is tightening.
Or maybe there are active union talks in your specific sector.
Exactly. Or corporate hiring freezes are looming on the horizon. You explicitly note those as constraints on your 30, 60, 90 plan.
You don't just ignore them and hope for the best.
Never. You build in schedule buffers. You plan stage rollouts instead of big bang launches. You line up backup vendors.
So by noting these macroeconomic factors as explicit risks on your personal register, you are structurally prepared for market shocks long before they ever hit your desk.
Exactly.
I mean, I see the immense value, but I still have to ask the logistical question.
Right on me.
We're asking a lot of the modern professional here. Synthesizing macroeconomic trends, reading dense political theory from monthly review press, building risk registers. Doesn't this run the risk of becoming so heavy that people just abandon it by month 2?
It's a highly valid concern.
Yeah.
But the expert response, directly from the source's philosophy, is a simple mantra. Treat theory as a tool.
Treat theory as a tool.
Right. You are not writing a master's thesis in economics.
Thank goodness.
The article explicitly states that a single one-page note, or even a single one-sentence citation from a reading, is enough to inform a decision and change your trajectory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Our hypothetical product lead, Sarah, reads one headline about AI de-skilling.
Right.
She writes down one sentence in her review, and she adjusts her 60-day plan to include an architectural deep dive for her team.
That's it.
That's it. It's about applied change, not exhaustive academic study.
Okay, treat theory as a tool. That completely lowers the barrier to entry.
It does.
And to ensure this whole process remains a tool and doesn't devolve into an overwhelming chore, the article shifts into some very strict, practical rules of engagement for executing this deep dive into your own work.
And those logistical constraints are actually what make the framework sustainable over the course of a whole year.
Exactly. The rules provided by the author are basically non-negotiable.
Right. What are they?
First, you have to keep the entire monthly review session under 1 hour total.
Just 1 hour.
Just 1 hour. You limit each section, diagnosing the wins, analyzing the setbacks, and building the roadmap to about 10 minutes each.
Wow. Very punchy.
Yeah. Second, you pick one reliable date and you defend it on your calendar. The author suggests the last business day of the month.
Block it out, no meetings allowed.
Exactly. And third, you use a simple reusable template. You combine a narrative journal with a metric dashboard and you just fill in the blanks.
You do not reinvent the wheel every 30 days. It maintains operational momentum without creating a massive administrative overhead.
And my absolute favorite tactical tip from this final section is what the author calls the warm start list.
Oh, this is so good.
It's genius. At the very end of your review hour, you plan 3 highly specific, low-friction tasks that you can complete in exactly 30 minutes on day 1 of the new month.
It instantly builds momentum.
Yeah. You wake up on the 1st of the month, you sit at your desk, you execute those 3 simple tasks, and you are already rolling forward with a psychological win.
It brilliantly bridges the gap between planning and doing.
Yes, it really does.
But before you get to that warm start, You have to officially close the loop on the review itself.
Right.
The framework requires a highly specific wrap-up. You distill all of your notes down to 1 to 3 core lessons.
Keep it brief.
Yeah. You explicitly name one single decision you are going to change going forward based on what you learned.
Just one.
Just one. And finally, you choose one habit to carry into the next month.
Wow.
One decision changed, one habit carried forward.
It forces closure. You archive the notes, you sketch 2 or 3 macroeconomic consequences to watch for the rest of the year, and you are done.
You are. But this raises an important question, and it's a ripple effect I want you, the listener, to really mull over.
Oh, interesting.
We've talked extensively about how empowering this can be for an individual employee to map labor dynamics and macroeconomic leverage.
Right.
But imagine what happens if the executive suite adopts this exact same critical framework.
Uh-oh.
What if corporations start using this structural analysis not to empower workers, but to outmaneuver employee negotiations?
That is dark.
What happens when HR uses the class and collaboration line to identify exactly who holds most informal leverage in a team and systematically dismantles that leverage to make the department easier to automate?
Wow.
This framework is a powerful lens, but a lens can be looked through from both ends.
That is a chilling but entirely realistic thought. It really proves that structural awareness is a strategic weapon no matter who is wielding it. Thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. If you want to stop mistaking pure exhaustion for progress and start building a career with real structural awareness, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an insight.
Highly recommend.
Also, I highly encourage you to read the full original article by Felix Römer to get the exact templates, the full reading list, and the specific prompts we discussed today. You can find the link right in the show notes.
Check it out.
So what does this all mean? It means that taking control of your professional future doesn't start with a frantic, blind sprint forward. It starts with a clear-eyed, context-rich review of your past. You have to zoom out on the map, check the weather radar, and understand the macroeconomic terrain before you put your foot on the gas. Until next time, keep your lens wide and your plans sharp. Catch you on the next deep dive.